Good evening, fellow travelers of time. I am Professor Somnus, and tonight we embark on a journey that will carry you gently down the sacred waters of the Nile, back through the mists of 4,000 years, to a land where gods walked among mortals, and the desert held secrets that still whisper to us today. Close your eyes, if you will, and let yourself drift with me to ancient Egypt. Not the Egypt of golden pharaohs and glittering treasures that fills our museums, but the Egypt of dust and sweat, of back-breaking labor under the relentless sun, a craftsman in the workshops, a soul trying to survive another day in one of history's most demanding civilizations. But as a farmer on the banks of the Nile, a member of the peasant class that formed the overwhelming majority of the population, of simple people who lived and loved and struggled in the shadow of monuments that would outlast empires. Tonight, you will not walk as a pharaoh draped in linen and gold. You will not stride through marble halls with the power of gods at your command. As we explore why you wouldn't survive a day in ancient Egypt, both literally as the builders and socially as the economic engine of the entire state. Instead, you will experience Egypt as most of its people did, as a worker in the fields. So, what if you were to wake up in ancient Egypt, not as a king, not as a noble, not even as a scribe? The Nile flows before us, eternal and patient, carrying the lifeblood of Egypt just as it carried the hopes and dreams of countless generations. Its waters have witnessed the rise of dynasties and the fall of kings, the building of pyramids and the crafting of humble pottery. But this was the life of the forgotten majority, the peasants, the fellahin, who formed the very foundation of the Egyptian pyramid. Could you endure just 24 hours in their world? Tonight, these same waters will carry us gently into sleep. Section 1. Sunrise, the awakening. The first thing you notice isn't the gentle glow of dawn filtering through a window. It's the pervasive chill of the pre-dawn air. There is no soft mattress, no warm blanket to shield you from it. The air inside the small, largely windowless room is thick and heavy with the smells of sleep, arranged one behind the other. Your parents, your siblings, perhaps a grandparent who is too old for the fields. The only summons you need are the first hints of gray light appearing in the doorway. There's no bathroom, no running water. Religion is not a separate part of life. It is woven into the very fabric of your existence. The sun is climbing, and the fields are waiting. As you chew the sandy, tough bread, you look at the faces of your family. Their expressions mirror your own, a stoic, resigned acceptance of the day ahead. Your father's hands are gnarled and calloused into permanent claws. Your mother's face, though she may only be in her early 30s, is already deeply lined with the worry of feeding her family. You are a peasant, the lowest and broadest rung on the social ladder, just a step above an enslaved person. Your life is not your own. It's inextricably tied to the plot of land you work, which is owned by a wealthy noble you've never met, a distant temple, or the pharaoh himself. You are a cog in a vast agricultural machine, and your 24-hour struggle for survival has only just begun. In a small niche in the wall, there might be a crude clay figurine of a household deity. Perhaps it is Base, the dwarf-like god who protects the family and wards off evil spirits, snakes, and scorpions. Or Torit, the hippopotamus-headed goddess who protects pregnant women and children. You might offer a silent plea to Osiris, the great god of agriculture and resurrection, or to Hapi, the divine spirit of the Nile's annual flood, asking for their favor. Your survival, you believe with absolute certainty depends as much on the whims and moods of these powerful gods as it does on your own hard work. You pray for a good flood, a strong harvest, and protection from the endless list of dangers lurking in the fields, the water, and the darkness. A trip to the designated waste area on the edge of the village, or simply into the nearest canal, serves as your toilet. A quick rinse of the face and hands comes from a large clay jug of water, drawn yesterday from a nearby irrigation canal or the Nile itself. This water, unknown to you, teems with microscopic dangers. You are constantly and unavoidably exposed to waterborne pathogens and parasites, like the worms that cause schistosomiasis. These tiny organisms in the river water can drill right through your skin as you wash, leading to a lifetime of internal bleeding, organ damage, and chronic fatigue. It is a disease that plagued nearly the entire population, and the familiar sounds of the village slowly coming to life. A distant cock crow, the impatient braying of a donkey. Your first meal of the day is a piece of coarse, gritty bread made from immerse wheat or barley. The flour is ground by hand by the women of the house, who spend hours every day kneeling at a saddle quern, a large sloping stone, grinding the grain with a smaller stone. This process inevitably mixes in sand from the desert and tiny rock particles from the grinding stones themselves, which will slowly and painfully grind your teeth down to stumps over the years. Dental attrition and abscesses are a source of constant, agonizing pain and a common cause of death. Alongside the bread, you have a handful of raw onions or garlic for flavor, and a drink of water or, more likely, a weak, nutrient-rich beer. This beer isn't for recreation. It's a staple of the diet, a vital source of calories, vitamins, and hydration, and was often safer to drink than the untreated water from the river. Meat is an almost unimaginable luxury, something you might taste only once or twice a year during a major religious festival. And the low murmur of your mother, already at work by the small dome-shaped oven in the courtyard. She is likely using dried animal dung as fuel, and the smoke stings your eyes as you sit up, swinging your legs off the mat. Your body already aches. This is not the temporary soreness from a bad night's sleep. It is a deep, settled exhaustion, a permanent resident in your muscles from yesterday's labor, and the day before, and every day before that. It's not a temporary condition. It is simply how your body feels, and maybe even your father's brother and his family. Privacy, as a concept, does not exist here. Your life is a communal affair from the moment you wake to the collective sounds of the family stirring, to the moment you collapse back onto your mat in a state of utter exhaustion. The front room might be for receiving the rare visitor or for household crafts, the middle room for sleeping, and the back, a courtyard open to the sky, for cooking. The windows are not for the view. They are mere slits, placed high up on the walls. They are designed not to let light in, but to let the worst of the day's heat escape, while offering a sliver of privacy. The roof is flat, constructed from layers of palm trunks, reeds, and mud, and serves as a vital extra living space, a place to store grain, dry laundry, and even sleep during the sweltering summer months, of stirred dust, of dried mud, and the faint, acrid scent of the nearby cooking fire. Your home, a simple, rectangular block made of mud bricks, a mixture of Nile mud, sand, and chopped straw pressed into wooden molds and left to bake in the sun, has one primary purpose: to provide basic shelter from the relentless, punishing heat of the Egyptian sun. You are waking up on a rough mat, woven from reeds or papyrus stalks, laid directly upon the packed earth floor. This humble structure probably has 2 or 3 small rooms. You share this cramped space with your entire multi-generational family. There is no alarm clock to signal the start of the day. Your morning routine is brutally simple. Before any work begins, you take a small, quiet moment for a simple act of devotion. Then, breakfast. Forget coffee, tea, or toast. You eat quickly, squatting on the dirt floor. There's no time to waste. Section 2, Morning. To the fields as the sun bleeds a brilliant orange and red across the eastern horizon. You leave the relative cool of your mud brick house and step into the waking world. The village, a dense cluster of homes, just like yours, is now a hive of activity. Men and older boys like you are gathering their tools from against the walls of their houses. You reach the plot assigned to your family, its boundaries marked by simple stone posts. The fields need water constantly. The residual moisture from the flood provides the initial life, but the growing crops need a steady supply to thrive under the Egyptian sun. This is where the vast, intricate network of hand-dug canals and irrigation ditches comes into play. Keeping them clear of silt and weeds and in good repair is a constant, year-round job. To get water from the main canal to the higher fields, you use a shadoof. This ingenious device, a long wooden pole balanced on a central pillar with a bucket and rope on one end and a heavy counterweight of mud and rock on the other, makes lifting the water easier, but the work is still grueling. You pull the rope to dip the leather bucket into the canal. The counterweight swings the full bucket up, and you guide it to empty into the ditch that feeds your field. Dip, pull, swing, empty, over and over and over again. The rhythmic motion becomes a trance, your muscles burning with lactic acid, your skin baking under the increasingly intense sun. Each bucket of water is another drop of life for the crops that will feed the kingdom, and another moment of back-breaking toil for you. The sun is climbing higher, the heat is becoming a physical presence, and your day is far from over. The primary task of the day is plowing. If your family is fortunate, you have a pair of oxen to pull the plow. You guide the animals, shouting commands and using a stick to urge them on, forcing the wooden blade through the heavy, damp soil. It's slow, arduous, mind-numbing work. The sun climbs, and the heat begins to build. If you're not so lucky, there are no oxen. The plow is pulled by you and your father, your shoulders straining against a rough wooden yoke, just like the beasts you cannot afford. Or worse, there is no plow at all, and you must break the earth by hand with nothing but your hoe, bent at the waist, for hour after agonizing hour under the rising sun. Their faces grim and set with the day's purpose. The women and children of the family often join in for this part, walking the plowed lines, scattering handfuls of barley and immer wheat seeds from reed baskets to press the precious seeds deep into the earth and protect them from birds and the wind. You might then drive herds of sheep or goats across the newly sown field. Their hooves trampled the seeds into the soil, accomplishing a task that would take days of back-breaking labor by hand. You pick up your own, a simple wooden hoe with a stone blade lashed on with leather thongs, and perhaps a primitive wooden plow. Its tip may be hardened by fire, or, if your master is exceptionally wealthy, tipped with a sliver of bronze. These are not advanced machines. They are crude extensions of your own body, tools designed for the application of pure brute force against the earth. You don't own these tools, just as you don't own the home you sleep in or the land you farm. Your current 24-hour struggle is taking place during Parade, the season of growing, which runs from about October to February. The great annual flood, Akit, the season of inundation, has receded. For 4 months, the river swelled and spilled its banks, covering the entire valley in water and forcing you and your family to retreat to the crowded village on higher ground. Now, the waters have withdrawn, leaving behind a thick, dark, and incredibly fertile layer of silt the black land, or Kemet, from which Egypt gets its name. This black soil is a divine gift, the source of all life, but it can also be a curse. If the flood was too low, the layer of silt would be thin, and the land would be parched, leading to poor harvests and famine. If it was too high, it would be a destructive, violent torrent, washing away homes, dikes, and boundary markers, leading to chaos. Your very existence hangs on this delicate, divine balance. You are a tenant farmer, a serf, bound to this plot of earth by tradition and by law. Your family has likely worked this same piece of land for generations, paying a heavy, non-negotiable taxa, huge chunk of your harvest, to a distant, unseen landlord whose agents are the only contact you have with the world of power. Your entire year of work is dictated by the 3 seasons of the Nile. Walking to the fields in a long, silent procession of your fellow villagers, once the ground is broken into furrows, it's time for sowing. But the work doesn't stop there. Section 3. Midday, a brief respite. The sun is now a merciless white disk hanging directly overhead in a bleached, cloudless sky. The air shimmers with a heat that rises in visible waves from the ground. But by the sheer physical impossibility of continuing at the same pace, work across the fields slows, not for leisure, but for self-preservation, to avoid collapse from heat stroke. Other families are taking their own respite nearby, could descend without warning and devour weeks of labor in a matter of hours, spelling ruin for your family. Mice, rats, and birds are a constant nuisance, stealing seeds and grain. And then there are the bigger, more terrifying dangers. A hippopotamus, wandering from the reeds of the Nile, could trample a huge portion of your precious field in a single night, and there is little you could do to stop the aggressive, multi-ton beast. A crocodile might have laid its eggs near the canal and would attack anything that came too close. You are in a constant, low-grade war against nature to protect every single stalk of wheat, every single barley plant. Their low conversations, a dull hum across the fields, perhaps on a donkey to elevate them above the workers. They are a physical manifestation of your place in this world. They work for the landowner, and their sole job is to ensure that the production quotas are met, which means making sure you are working hard enough. Their presence is a source of pure anxiety. A harsh word, a disapproving glance, or the crack of a whip to hurry the work along could mean trouble. This is a rare moment of community in the workday, an hour at most, just enough time for the food to settle and for the worst of the sun's fury to pass its zenith. The sun hasn't backed down, but the work cannot wait. With a collective groan, you and the other farmers rise to your feet, your joints stiff and protesting. The brief rest is over. You pick up your hoe or return to the rhythmic trance of the shadoof. The long afternoon looms before you, promising more of the same relentless toil. You have survived the morning, but but the day's greatest trials are far from over. News is exchanged between families, local gossip is shared in hushed tones, and complaints about the relentless heat, the aching work, and the unreasonable demands of the overseers are muttered under their breath, safely out of earshot of any authority figures. It is a moment to feel human, to connect with your neighbors who share your exact fate, but even now you cannot truly relax. Your eyes instinctively scan the fields, always watching for threats. You find the meager, dappled shade of a lone sycamore fig tree, or simply sit by the side of an irrigation ditch, dangling your legs into the cool, murky water. This momentary relief is a profound blessing, even with the knowledge of the invisible threats swimming within that same water. All shadows have vanished, shrunk to nothing beneath your feet. There is no escape from the oppressive glare and heat. The black earth itself radiates warmth, and the sweat that drips from your brow and down your back stings your eyes and attracts swarms of persistent flies. Your throat is parched, your lips are cracked and swollen, and every muscle in your body, from your neck to your ankles, is screaming in protest. This is the peak of the workday, and a necessary pause is enforced not by rule. Lunch is not an event, it's a refueling stop. Your mother or one of your sisters brings a simple basket to the fields, carrying the same food you had for breakfast, more of the hard, coarse bread, and a few raw onions or radishes to eat with it. The bread is hard and dry by now, but you tear into it hungrily, grateful for the calories. You might have a small flask of warm water, or more likely, you'll just cup your hands and drink deeply from the same irrigation canal you've been working beside all morning. On a good day, the basket might contain a small bowl of cooked lentils or fava beans, a welcome addition of protein that feels like a luxury. You are not alone in this break. A swarm of locusts, a biblical plague made real. You might also spot the estate's overseer or a scribe making their rounds. The break is painfully short. Section 4. Afternoon. The grind continues. The afternoon is a long, drawn-out war waged against the sun and the limits of your own body. The temporary relief of the midday meal is now a distant memory, replaced by a bone-deep weariness that settles into your marrow. You are at the absolute bottom of the social pyramid. Above you, in ascending order, are the artisans, the merchants, the soldiers, the scribes, the priests, the regional nobles, the vizier, a figure more feared than a swarm of locusts or a wandering hippo, the tax collector. The concept of currency is not widely used. There is no room for negotiation or appeal. A poor harvest due to a low flood or a pest infestation is your problem, not theirs. Failure to pay the assessed amount is not an option. The punishments are severe, public, and designed to inspire terror. Tomb paintings and official documents show exactly what happens to farmers who fall short. They are thrown to the ground, their families held back and forced to watch, as they are beaten on the soles of their feet with heavy wooden rods, a punishment known as the bastinado. In some cases, your family could be imprisoned, or you could be sold into servitude to work off the debt. You pay with what you produce, grain. A huge percentage of your harvest is claimed by the state to feed the court, the army, and the legions of priests and administrators. This tax could be as high as 60% of your total yield. What is left has to feed your entire family for a full year and provide enough seeds for the next planting season. The margin for error is non-existent. He is usually a scribe, an educated man who can read, write, and, most importantly, calculate. His arrival, accompanied perhaps by a few guards, sends a palpable ripple of fear through the fields. Work doesn't stop. If anything, it gets faster, as everyone tries to look as industrious as possible, hoping to avoid unwanted attention. And finally, at the very pinnacle, the living god, the pharaoh. They all depend entirely on the surplus food you produce, yet you see almost none of the vast wealth it generates, followed by assistants with measuring ropes, making his calculations of the field's area and estimating its potential yield. Your heart pounds in your chest. You bow your head, avoid eye contact, and offer a silent, desperate prayer that his assessment will be fair, or at least merciful. He makes his notes on a shard of pottery or a wooden board, then moves on, leaving a trail of profound anxiety in his wake. The sun finally begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, but the day's labor isn't done yet. Your labor fuels the entire kingdom. It pays for the armies, builds the temples, and fills the palaces with luxuries. But your reward is just enough food to survive until the next harvest. The heat is a suffocating blanket. You were born a peasant. You will die a peasant. Your sons will inherit your tools, your plot of land, and your crushing debts to the state. It is a cycle as predictable and as inescapable as the Nile's annual flood. To be a scribe is the dream of many, for they are the masters of hieroglyphs, the key to power and wealth. But to become a scribe requires years of expensive education that is utterly inaccessible to you. You cannot read, you cannot write, and you never will, making the air feel thick and heavy in your lungs. Every movement is a monumental effort. Your world has shrunk to the small patch of earth directly in front of you. The repetitive rhythm of your work and the burning pain that radiates through your back and shoulders. This is the true test of endurance. It is not about skill. A child can learn these tasks. It is about pure, relentless stamina and the mental fortitude to continue when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to stop. You work in a haze, your mind dulled and made stupid by the heat and the sheer monotony of the task. Your thoughts become simple, primal. One more row to hoe, one more bucket of water to lift. The sun crawls across the sky with agonizing, almost imperceptible slowness. In these punishing hours, the immense weight of your social position feels heaviest. There is virtually no chance for upward mobility. And then a new source of anxiety appears on the dirt track that borders the fields. You don't pay your taxes with money. The tax collectors are notoriously harsh and are themselves under pressure to meet quotas. So, as the scribe walks slowly through your family's field, Section 5. Late afternoon, the state's demands just when you think you have nothing left to give. When your muscles have been taxed to their absolute limit, a new obligation might arise. Farming your assigned plot is your main job, but it is not your only one. Every able-bodied peasant in Egypt is subject to labor, a tax paid not in grain, but in sweat, muscle, and sometimes blood. This national service is most common during the Akit season. You and hundreds of other men are harnessed to thick papyrus ropes to haul multi-ton stones on massive wooden sledges. This is how the great temples of Karnak and Luxor rose from the desert sands. It was all powered by the muscles of men like you. As you toil on the project, the sun finally begins to touch the horizon. your spirit worn thin by the crushing weight of your own insignificance. You pull in unison, your bare feet slipping on the slick mud and water laid down in front of the sledge to reduce friction. As foremen stand on the stone, clapping or cracking whips to mark the rhythm. Heave, heave, heave. It is mind-numbing, soul-crushing work. You are a completely anonymous, expendable part of a vast human machine, building magnificent monuments for a pharaoh you will never meet, and for a divine glory you will never share in. The 4 months of the year when the Nile's floodwaters make farming impossible. During this time, legions of farmers are conscripted and sent to work on the pharaoh's grand construction projects. But you can be called up at any time, whenever the state requires a surge of manpower. Wealthier individuals, like artisans or merchants, can often pay a fee or hire a substitute to get out of this duty. But for you, the peasant, there is no escape. An overseer arrives in the fields and calls out a list of names. Yours could be on it. It's lethally dangerous. You could be sent to Gebel el-Silsila to cut sandstone, or to Aswan to hew the massive blocks of granite. You spend endless hours cutting these blocks from the earth with the most primitive of tools. You might pound at the rock with a hard dolerite ball to create a channel, or cut slots into the rock, jam them with wooden wedges, and then pour water on them, waiting for the wood to swell, and hopefully crack the stone along the desired line. The air is thick with fine rock dust that you inhale with every breath, filling your lungs and leading to silicosis, a chronic and fatal lung disease. A misplaced swing of a mallet, a falling rock, or a snapped rope could mean a crushed limb or instant death. There is no medicine or advanced surgery here. A serious injury, like a compound fracture, is a death sentence. Protesting is unthinkable and would result in a severe beating. You put down your hoe, say a quick, worried farewell to your father, and join the shuffling line of other conscripted men from your village. Your destination could be a nearby temple that needs repairs, or a major canal that needs to be dredged of a year's worth of accumulated silt. The most dreaded assignment, however, is the quarry. Here, the work is not just exhausting, or perhaps you are assigned to transport these massive blocks from the quarry to a construction site miles away. This is how the pyramids were built. Section 6. Evening and night. Darkness and dangers. The walk back to the village is a slow, silent shuffle of exhausted men. The sky is a brilliant spectacle of orange, purple, and gold. The women of the household have not been idle. Their day has been filled with its own forms of relentless labor. They spent hours on their knees, grinding the grain for the day's bread. Scorpions, like the highly venomous deathstalker, but as an utter collapse of an exhausted body. During the hottest months of the year, you might carry your reed mat up the small, piercingly bright stars, a sight completely unchanged for thousands of years. Could crawl into the house seeking warmth. Snakes, such as the Egyptian cobra or the saw-scaled viper, could do the same, and a venomous bite in the dark, far from any help, would be fatal. There is also a deep-seated belief in malevolent spirits, ghosts of the restless dead who could bring sickness or misfortune. The presence of the household gods provides a sliver of comfort against these fears. A physically demanding task that archaeology shows caused arthritis and skeletal deformities. The gnawing fear of the tax collector, the crushing, inhuman weight of the quarried stones. It was a day of relentless, unceasing toil, a life lived constantly on the very edge of survival. You have endured 24 hours, But could you find the strength to wake up and do it all over again tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day for the rest of your short life? For the ancient Egyptian farmer, there was no other choice. You fall into a deep, exhausted, dreamless sleep, knowing with absolute certainty that in just a few short hours the sun will rise and the entire cycle will begin again. Tended to the youngest children, mended torn clothing, and spent any spare moments spinning raw flax into the fine thread that would eventually be woven into the linen cloth used for everyone's clothing. Their work is just as vital, just as unending as yours, but you barely notice it. You are focused on the simple, mechanical act of putting one foot in front of the other. The air is finally cooling, a welcome relief that feels like a physical balm on your sunburnt skin. As you approach your home, the smell of cooking food, simple as it is, the most welcoming and beautiful scent in the world. Inside, your family is waiting. The evening meal is the main meal of the day, and the family gathers for it. You all sit on the packed earth floor, sharing a thick vegetable stew made with lentils or beans, seasoned with garlic and onions. With it, there is, of course, more bread and mugs of the same weak beer you had in the morning. If someone got lucky fishing in one of the canals with a net or spear, there might be grilled tilapia or catfish to add precious protein to the meal. It's a simple, repetitive, and bland diet by modern standards. But tonight, after a day of such exertion, it tastes like a feast. As true darkness falls, the world outside your small home shrinks and becomes menacing. Light is a precious commodity. A wealthy family might have numerous beeswax candles, but your family has a single, small clay lamp, a simple bowl with a spout for a wick that burns smelly animal fat or castor oil. It casts flickering, dancing shadows on the mud brick walls, creating a small bubble of light in the vast darkness. This is family time. Your father might sit in the corner, carefully repairing a broken hoe handle. Your mother might be at her loom, weaving linen cloth. It's a time for stories of the great gods like Ra and his nightly journey through the underworld, or folk tales about clever animals and foolish peasants. A small pocket of peace and connection in a life of hardship. Before settling down to sleep, you might say another prayer or touch an amulet dedicated to a protective deity. The night holds its own very real dangers. Imagine the massive undertaking of building an entire royal capital from nothing, while field workers continue their endless labor to feed the empire. Thousands of craftsmen, architects, and laborers are diverted to this new project. Stone must be quarried, blocks cut and shaped, temples designed according to new principles that abandon the dark. Suggests a ruler who valued truth and naturalism over the formal conventions that had governed Egyptian art for millennia. In the workshops of Akhenaten sculptors and painters experimented with new ways of seeing and representing the human form, creating masterpieces that still move viewers today. Mysterious interiors of traditional Egyptian temples in favor of open courtyards where the Aten S-rays can reach the worshippers directly. Egypt's empire begins to crumble. Tribute that once flowed from conquered territories slows to a trickle. Trade routes that brought wealth and exotic goods to Egyptian cities become unsafe as local rulers assert independence. The royal family lives in splendid isolation. Queen Nefertiti, whose bust would become one of the most famous artifacts of ancient Egypt. His religious revolution has created more enemies than converts, and even his own family shows signs of discord. Disease may have struck the royal household. No tomb has been definitively identified as his final resting place. No account survives of his death or burial. The heretic pharaoh simply disappears, leaving behind a magnificent but doomed city and a religious revolution that would be systematically erased by his successors. Akhetaten is abandoned, its population relocated to traditional cities. The beautiful temples and palaces are systematically dismantled, their stones carted away for use in other projects. The revolutionary art style is abandoned in favor of traditional forms. Was he a visionary whose ideas were simply too advanced for his time? A mystic whose spiritual insights led him to abandon practical governance? A calculating politician whose religious revolution was really an attempt to consolidate power? Or perhaps a combination of all these things, a complex individual whose personal beliefs and political necessities became fatally intertwined? Most dramatically, Akhenaten's name is chiseled from monuments and removed from official king lists, an attempt to erase him from history itself. Ruling with absolute power over one of history's greatest civilizations could not escape the consequences of challenging too much too quickly. Akhenaten's revolution reminds us that power, no matter how complete it may appear, ultimately depends on the consent and cooperation of those who must implement and accept change. Several of the royal daughters die young. We turn our attention to another mystery that has captivated archaeologists and historians. Deep in the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs were laid to rest for eternity, lies a tomb that has yielded one of Egyptology's most enduring puzzles. Economic pressures mount as the costs of building and maintaining Akhetaten drain the royal treasury. Mysteriously disappears from official records around year 12 of the reign. Some scholars suggest she was elevated to curuler status under a different name. The artistic innovations of the Amarna period influenced Egyptian art for generations to come. The concept of monotheism, while rejected in Egypt, may have influenced the development of similar ideas in other cultures. Some scholars see connections between Akhenaten's great hymn to the Aton and the biblical Psalm 104, suggesting that the heretic pharaoh's religious poetry may have survived in new forms. Others believe she fell from favor or died. Initially continues some aspects of Aten worship, but gradually begins the process of restoration. This young pharaoh, originally named Tutankhaten in honor of the Aten coup, changes his name to Tutankhamen, signaling a return to the worship of Amen. The mystery adds to the growing sense that even at the heart of the revolution, all is not well. Surrounded by courtiers and artists who share or pretend to share their vision, while the rest of Egypt increasingly turns away from their radical experiment. Egypt's empire stretched from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates River in the north. The powerful priesthood of Ammon does not simply disappear when their temples are closed. For generations, their families have worshipped local gods and goddesses, seeking protection for their children, success in their harvests, safety in childbirth. Akhenaten's revolution offers them the Aten, a distant solar disk that provides no comfort in times of personal crisis, no intercession in matters of daily survival. They retreat, organize resistance, and wait for their opportunity to strike back. Regional governors, many of whom owe their positions to generations of loyalty to the old gods, begin to question their allegiance to a pharaoh who has abandoned the divine order that legitimized their rule. Bound together by military might, economic necessity, and religious tradition, Local governors and vassal kings had sworn loyalty to Pharaoh as the living god Horus, son of Ra. What did these oaths mean when Pharaoh declared that Ra did not exist? The art created during Akhenaten's reign breaks dramatically from Egyptian tradition, where previous pharaohs were depicted as idealized, eternally youthful god-kings. Akhenaten appears with elongated features, a prominent belly, and feminine hips. His queen, the beautiful Nefertiti, is shown with similar stylistic elements. Their daughters are depicted as actual children rather than miniature adults, playing and embracing their parents in scenes of domestic intimacy previously unknown in royal art. This new artistic style, known today as the Amarna period, but artistic innovation could not overcome the practical challenges of Akhenaten's revolution. Letters discovered at Amarna, written on clay tablets in the Akkadian diplomatic language of the ancient Near East, reveal the growing crisis in Egypt's international relations. Vassal kings in Syria and Palestine send increasingly desperate pleas for military support against invading armies. They address their letters to Pharaoh with traditional formulas of worship and submission, but their requests go unanswered. Akhenaten seems consumed by his religious vision to the exclusion of practical governance. While he builds his new capital and composes hymns to the Aten, the domestic situation grows equally troubling. Common people, the workers in the fields and workshops who form the foundation of Egyptian society, find themselves caught between competing religious authorities. The new capital of Akhenaten becomes a glittering island of revolutionary thought, surrounded by a sea of resentment and confusion. As Akhenaten's reign progresses, signs of strain become evident even within the royal family. By year 14 of his reign, Akhenaten's grand experiment is clearly failing. The empire he inherited is in tatters. Then, in year 17 of his reign, Akhenaten himself vanishes from the historical record. The immediate aftermath of Akhenaten's disappearance reveals the depth of opposition his revolution had generated. His successor, probably a son or suitor. The restoration that follows Akhenaten's reign is systematic and thorough. Yet Akhenaten's revolution was not entirely without lasting impact. The mystery of Akhenaten continues to fascinate modern scholars and the public alike. What remains clear is that even divine kings, as the echoes of this ancient revolution fade into the whispers of desert wind. So, there it is. 24 hours in the life of an ancient Egyptian farmer. You were the engine of one of the mightiest civilizations the world has ever known. Yet your own existence was fragile, precarious, and almost completely forgotten by the history that you helped to build. It was not a life of golden splendor or mystical secrets. It was a life of relentless, back-breaking labor, where power and ideology shaped the destiny of millions, a reality defined entirely by the sun, the soil, and the sacred river. His name was Akhenaten, and his story reveals how even divine kings could fall the throne of Egypt, passed to a young man who would become one of history's most controversial rulers. Born as Amenhotep IV, he would transform into Perhaps it is the influence of his mother, the powerful Queen Tai, who came from outside the traditional royal bloodline. Perhaps it is his own mystical nature, seeking simplicity in complexity. Or perhaps it is a calculated political move to break the growing power of Amun's priesthood. History offers us clues, but no certainties. The heretic king, whose revolution would shake the foundations of Egyptian civilization. He proclaims that there is only one true God, the Aten, the visible disk of the sun itself, not Ra, the ancient sun god, with his falcon head and complex mythology, but the simple, pure disk that provides light and life to all creation. But names are not enough for this revolutionary king. He abandons Thebes, the ancient capital, with its massive temples to Ammon, and sets out to build an entirely new city dedicated to his god. It was a life of meager food, constant anxiety, and virtually zero upward mobility. Ancient temples, some standing for centuries, are closed or repurposed. The intricate bureaucracy that managed religious life across the empire faces dissolution. The pharaoh, who was once the living embodiment of the god Horus, now declares himself the sole intermediary of a completely different deity. The walls are painted with traditional scenes, the pharaoh smiting enemies, receiving tribute, making offerings to the ancient gods, about halfway between Memphis and Thebes, on the east bank, where the sun rises each day. He names this new capital Akheton Horizon of the Aten. Today we know it as Amarna, and its brief existence would produce some of the most beautiful and unusual art in Egyptian history. Amun-Ra, king of the gods, dominates the religious landscape, his priests wielding power that rivals that of Pharaoh himself. But Egypt was not only fields and endless labor. In the palaces of Memphis and Thebes, a different world existed. It was in this world of pharaohs and priests that one man dared to challenge the very foundation of Egyptian civilization. Hundreds of gods and goddesses govern every aspect of life and death. Ra sails across the sky in his solar bark. Osiris rules the underworld. Isis protects mothers and children. Thoth records the deeds of the living and the dead. This intricate web of divine relationships has sustained Egyptian civilization for over 1,000 years. When Amenhotep IV ascends the throne. Segment 2. The revolutionary pharaoh, Akhenaten's rise and fall in the 14th century before the Common Era. As workers toiled in fields we have just visited, picture, if you will, the royal palace at Thebes in the early days of his reign. But young Amenhotep IV is troubled by visions that will not leave him in peace. In the quiet hours before dawn, as workers in distant fields begin their endless toil, the future Akhenaten walks the corridors of his palace, his mind wrestling with concepts that will reshape a civilization. The traditional Egyptian pantheon is vast and complex, yet something in the young pharaoh's mind rebels against this multiplicity. In the 5th year of his reign, Amenhotep IV makes a declaration that reverberates through the ancient world. This is not merely a religious reform. It is a revolution that strikes at the heart of Egyptian society. Overnight, thousands of priests find themselves unemployed. To mark this transformation, Amenhotep IV changes his own name to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to the Aten. The site he chooses lies along the Nile. Segment 3. Mysteries Beneath the Sand. The Enigma of Tomb KV-FT5. In the winter of 1907, the Valley of the Kings yielded one of its most perplexing secrets. Edward Ayrton, working under the direction of Theodore Davis, discovered a small, unremarkable tomb that would puzzle Egyptologists for more than a century. Known today as KV-55, this tomb contained a mystery wrapped in linen, sealed in gold, and shrouded in the political upheavals we have just explored. The Valley of the Kings stretches like a great wound in the Theban hills, carved by millions of years of rare but devastating flash floods. For 5 centuries, from approximately 1550 to 1070 BCE, this desolate valley served as the burial ground for Egypt's most powerful rulers. Hidden away from the fertile Nile Valley, protected by the pyramid-shaped peak of Al-Qurn, these tombs were intended to house the pharaohs for eternity. As winter sunlight filters down into the valley floor, imagine the moment when Ayrton's workers first broke through the ancient seal of tomb KV55. The narrow shaft descends steeply into the bedrock, its walls unmarked by the elaborate decorations that typically adorned royal burial chambers. This tomb was clearly prepared in haste, lacking the careful planning and artistic splendor that characterized the great sepulchres nearby. The air that escaped from the tomb that day had been sealed for over 3 millennia. Within that stale, ancient atmosphere lay evidence of one of the most turbulent periods in Egyptian history, the aftermath of Akhenaten's religious revolution and the desperate attempts to restore order to a shaken kingdom. The tomb itself is modest, consisting of a single chamber barely large enough to house a royal burial. The walls are rough-hewn limestone, undecorated and unfinished. Everything about KV55 suggests urgency, a burial conducted quickly and perhaps in secret. Very different from the elaborate funeral processions and ceremonies that typically marked a pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. But it was the contents of the tomb that truly captured the imagination of those first archaeologists and continues to perplex scholars today. At the center of the burial chamber lay a magnificent coffin, its surface covered in gold leaf and inlaid with colored glass and semi-precious stones. The craftsmanship was exquisite, worthy of the highest levels of Egyptian artistry. Yet, something was wrong with this beautiful coffin. The face, which should have borne the eternal features of the deceased, had been deliberately destroyed. Someone had taken hammer and chisel to the golden mask, obliterating the features with violent, purposeful blows. The cartouches, the oval frames that contained the dead person's royal name, had been carefully cut away, erasing the identity of whoever lay within. This deliberate defacement spoke of more than mere tomb robbery. Thieves might steal gold and precious objects, but they rarely took time to systematically destroy the identity of the deceased. This vandalism suggested something far more sinister: damnatio memoriae, the deliberate erasure of someone from history itself. Inside the damaged coffin lay the mummy of a young person, aged somewhere between 20 and 35 years at death. But even this seemingly straightforward discovery raised more questions than it answered. The mummification was incomplete, hastily done, lacking the careful preservation techniques that characterized royal burials of the period. Parts of the body were missing, other parts damaged, as if the mummy had been moved and reburied under circumstances of great urgency. The burial goods found in KV55 added to the mystery rather than solving it. 4 canopic jars, designed to hold the preserved organs of the deceased, bore the names and faces of women from Akhenaten's royal family. These jars had clearly been made for someone else, then hastily adapted for use in this burial. The names and faces on the jars suggested connections to Queen Ta, Akhenaten's mother, and other female members of the Amarna royal family. But perhaps the most intriguing artifact found in the tomb was a golden shrine, miniature in scale, but perfect in its craftsmanship. This shrine depicted Queen Ta in the company of her husband, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten's father. The presence of this object suggested that whoever was buried in KV55 had close connections to the royal family of the late 18th dynasty. As archaeologists and scholars examined the evidence from KV55, several theories emerged about the identity of the mysterious mummy. The age at death, estimated from the skeletal remains, suggested someone who died young. perhaps in their 20s or early 30s. The quality of the burial goods indicated royal or near-royal status. The deliberate defacement of the coffin suggested someone whose memory had been deliberately targeted for destruction. For many years, the most popular theory identified the mummy as Akhenaten himself. This interpretation saw KV-55 as evidence of the fate that befell the heretic pharaoh after his death. According to this theory, Akhenaten was initially buried with full royal honors in his tomb at Amarna. But when his religious revolution was reversed and his new capital abandoned, his mummy was secretly moved to this hastily prepared tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The damaged face and removed cartouches reflected the official condemnation of his reign and the attempt to erase him from history. This theory was compelling because it seemed to explain so many aspects of the KV-55 mystery. Akhenaten's estimated age at death fitted the skeletal evidence. His status as a reviled heretic explained the deliberate damage to the coffin. The hasty, secretive nature of the burial aligned with what historians knew about the systematic erasure of Akhenaten's legacy by his successors. Yet, as forensic techniques improved, and scholars gained access to better methods of analysis, doubts began to emerge about the Akhenaten identification. More sophisticated analysis of the skeletal remains suggested that the person buried in KV-55 might have been even younger than initially thought, perhaps dying in their early 20s rather than their 30s. This younger age made the Akhenaten identification less certain, as historical evidence suggested that the heretic pharaoh reigned for 17 years and was likely older at his death. Additionally, some physical characteristics of the KV-55 mummy seemed inconsistent with the artistic representations of Akhenaten from the Amarna period. While artistic conventions could be misleading, the discrepancies raised questions about whether this mummy really represented the revolutionary pharaoh. An alternative theory gained support as scholars re-examined the evidence. This interpretation identified the KV-55 mummy as Smenkhare, a mysterious figure who may have served as Akhenaten's co-ruler or immediate successor. Historical records of Smenkhare are fragmentary and confusing, with some scholars suggesting that this name might even refer to Queen Nefertiti ruling under a different identity. The Smenkhare theory seemed to better explain the apparent age of the KV-55 mummy and could still account for the deliberate damage to the burial. If Smenkhare was closely associated with Akhenaten's religious revolution, he too might have been targeted for historical erasure when the traditional religion was restored. As the 21st century brought even more sophisticated analytical techniques to Egyptology, new approaches to the KV-55 mystery emerged. DNA analysis, CT scanning, and other modern forensic methods offered the possibility of definitively identifying the mysterious mummy. Tissue samples were taken, genetic markers analyzed, and family relationships explored through comparison with other royal mummies from the period. These modern investigations have provided some answers while raising new questions. DNA analysis has confirmed that the KV-55 mummy is male and closely related to other members of the late 18th dynasty royal family. The genetic evidence strongly suggests that this person was the father of Tutankhamun, the boy king, whose tomb would become the most famous archaeological discovery in Egyptian history. This genetic revelation has profound implications for understanding the complex family relationships within Akhenaten's dynasty. If the KV-55 mummy is indeed Tutankhamun's father, it supports the theory that this is either Akhenaten himself or someone very closely related to him. The family connections, revealed by DNA analysis, have helped clarify some aspects of this turbulent period while adding new layers of complexity to others. Yet, even with modern scientific techniques, the identity of the KV-55 mummy remains disputed. Different scholars interpret the same evidence in different ways, and new discoveries continue to add pieces to this ancient puzzle. The mystery endures not because the evidence is lacking, but because it is complex and sometimes contradictory, reflecting the chaotic political situation in which this burial took place. The story of KV-55 reminds us that archaeology is often more about questions than answers. Each discovery opens new avenues of inquiry. Each analysis reveals new complexities. The methods we use to study the past are constantly evolving, and today's certainties may become tomorrow's revised theories. But perhaps the greatest lesson of KV-55 is how it illuminates the very human dramas that played out in ancient Egypt. Behind the golden masks and elaborate ceremonies, real people faced impossible choices, political upheavals, and personal tragedies. The deliberate destruction of the coffin face speaks to passions and conflicts that transcend the centuries. Someone hated this person enough to try to destroy their very identity, to deny them the eternal life that every Egyptian hoped to achieve. As we contemplate this ancient mystery, we are reminded that the past is never truly past. The questions that puzzled Edward Ayrton in 1907 continue to challenge scholars today. The political conflicts that led to the defacement of this coffin echo in modern struggles between tradition and change, between religious orthodoxy and revolutionary vision. The winter sun sets over the Valley of the Kings, casting long shadows across the ancient tombs. Somewhere in this desolate landscape lie other secrets waiting to be discovered, other mysteries that will challenge our understanding of the past. The story of KV-55 continues to unfold, each new investigation adding detail to our picture of this turbulent period in Egyptian history. But not all of ancient Egypt was mystery and revolution. In the great palaces of Memphis and Thebes, life followed patterns established over millennia, patterns of luxury and ceremony that define the existence of Egypt's elite. To understand why you wouldn't survive a day in ancient Egypt, we must also explore the golden halls where power resided and examine whether even privilege could offer true security in this demanding civilization. Segment 4. Golden Halls, Life Among Egyptian Nobility. As evening approaches and shadows lengthen across the ancient landscape, let us step from the dusty mysteries of forgotten tombs into the perfumed halls of power, where Egypt's nobility lived lives of unimaginable luxury and unexpected peril. Here, in palaces lined with gold and lapis lazuli, a different kind of survival challenge awaited those fortunate enough to be born into the highest ranks of society. Picture the great palace at Memphis as sunset paints the western sky in shades of amber and rose. The massive mud brick walls, some 30 feet high, are covered in white limestone that gleams like snow in the fading light. Guards pace the ramparts, their bronze-tipped spears catching the last rays of the sun. Within these walls lies a world as removed from the field worker's existence as the heavens are from the earth. The central courtyard of the palace stretches for several acres, its floors paved with polished limestone inlaid with colored stones that form intricate geometric patterns. Pools of water, fed by channels connected to the Nile, reflect the painted columns that support roofed walkways around the perimeter. Lotus blossoms float serenely on the water's surface, their sweet fragrance mixing with the smoke of incense that burns constantly in braziers throughout the complex. You enter this world not as a pharaoh, for even among nobility there are countless gradations of rank and privilege, but as a person of substantial standing, perhaps the child of a provincial governor, or a successful merchant who has earned royal favor, or a skilled administrator whose talents have lifted your family from modest origins to the heights of Egyptian society. Your chambers reflect your elevated status. The walls are painted with scenes of daily life, servants bringing food and drink, musicians playing harps and flutes, dancers performing for the entertainment of guests. But these are not mere decorations. They are magical images intended to ensure that such pleasures will continue in the afterlife. Even in their most carefree moments, the Egyptian elite are mindful of death and the eternal journey that awaits. The bed upon which you sleep is a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Its frame is carved from imported ebony, inlaid with ivory and gold. The legs are shaped like those of a lion, symbol of royal power, while the headboard depicts protective deities who will guard your sleep. The mattress is not the simple reed mat of the field worker, but a carefully constructed platform of woven cords that provides both support and comfort. Linen sheets, woven so fine they are nearly transparent, cover you as you rest. But sleep does not come easily in the palace, despite the luxury of your surroundings. For life among the Egyptian elite is a constant performance, a delicate dance of protocol and politics, where a single misstep can mean the difference between continued favor and sudden, catastrophic fall from grace. Your morning begins before dawn, not because of an overseer's harsh voice, but because court protocol demands your presence at the daily ceremonies that affirm the pharaoh's divine nature. You must be bathed, perfumed, and dressed in garments appropriate to your rank before the sun touches the eastern horizon. Your clothing is linen of the finest quality, so thin that it serves more as ornament than protection from heat or cold. Your jewelry, gold collar, bracelets, anklets, is not merely decorative, but serves as a visible sign of your status and your relationship to royal power. The process of dressing is itself a complex ritual. Servants, themselves from families of some standing, assist with each garment. Your wig for, even the wealthy, shave their heads as protection against lice, and the heat must be perfectly arranged. Your makeup, applied by skilled cosmetic servants, is not vanity but necessity. Kohl around your eyes protects against the sun's glare and insect-borne diseases. The green and black pigments used in Egyptian cosmetics contain lead and antimony, which have antibacterial properties, making them practical as well as beautiful. As you make your way through the palace corridors toward the throne room, you navigate a world of rigid hierarchy and unspoken rules. The placement of your hands, the pace of your walk, the direction of your gaze are prescribed by centuries of court protocol. A visiting provincial governor might accidentally violate these rules and be forgiven, but someone of your standing, someone who lives daily in the palace, is expected to embody perfection in every gesture. The throne room itself is a marvel of Egyptian artistry and engineering. The ceiling, supported by massive columns carved to resemble papyrus plants, soars 50 feet above the floor. The walls are covered in gold leaf that catches and reflects the light from hundreds of oil lamps, creating an environment that seems to glow with divine radiance. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform reached by a series of steps, sits the golden throne of Pharaoh. The morning ceremony begins with the arrival of Pharaoh himself, preceded by fan-bearers, incense carriers, and musicians. The assembled nobility, hundreds of officials, priests, military commanders, and courtiers prostrate themselves as one, foreheads touching the polished stone floor. You remain in this position until Pharaoh speaks the traditional words that permit the court to rise. But even as you participate in this display of divine majesty, your mind is occupied with the complex calculations that govern palace life. Who stands closest to the throne today? Which officials have been granted the privilege of speaking directly to Pharaoh, whose absence from the ceremony might indicate a fall from favor? These observations are not idle curiosity, but essential intelligence, in a world where your survival depends on correctly reading the subtle signs of shifting political allegiance. The day's first meal is served in the great dining hall, a feast that would feed a village of field workers, but is considered routine for the palace elite. Long tables are laden with bread, made from the finest wheat, baked in dozens of shapes, and flavored with honey, dates, and exotic spices from distant lands. Meat is abundant: roasted beef, lamb, duck, goose, and fish from the Nile, all prepared by master cooks whose skills have been passed down through generations. Fruits impossible for common people to obtain grace these tables. Pomegranates from the eastern provinces, dates from the finest oases, figs both fresh and dried, grapes that will later be transformed into wine in the royal vineyards. Vegetables too are present in abundance: onions, leeks, garlic, lettuce, and cucumbers, all grown in the palace gardens and served with the morning dew still fresh upon them. Yet even this abundance comes with its own challenges. Table placement reflects your current standing in the complex hierarchy of court rank. Sitting too close to Pharaoh's table implies a presumption of intimacy that could be misinterpreted. Sitting too far away suggests that your influence is waning. The food you choose, the amount you eat, even the expressions on your face as you dine are observed and interpreted by dozens of other courtiers, equally concerned with their own positions. Wine flows freely at these meals, imported from the finest vineyards in the Delta and aged in clay jars sealed with the royal seal. But intoxication, while not forbidden, is dangerous in the palace environment. A careless word spoken under the influence of wine, a momentary lapse in protocol, an inappropriate gesture or laughably of these could be reported to higher authorities and used against you by rivals seeking to advance their own positions. The afternoon brings the complex business of actually governing the Egyptian empire. As a member of the nobility, you have responsibilities that extend far beyond your own comfort and pleasure. You might be called upon to adjudicate disputes between villages in your province, to oversee the collection of taxes from distant territories, or to coordinate with military commanders planning campaigns in Nubia or Syria. These responsibilities require not only intelligence and administrative skill, but also a deep understanding of the delicate balance of forces that holds the Egyptian state together. A decision that enriches your own holdings at the expense of royal revenues could be seen as disloyalty. A judgment that favors one influential family over another could create enemies who will remember and seek revenge years later. Every choice you make as a noble carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate situation. The palace workshops provide a constant backdrop to the day's activities. Master craftsmen work gold into jewelry of exquisite beauty, their tools creating sounds like tiny bells as they shape metal that represents months of labor from distant mines. Painters apply pigments to papyrus and palace walls, creating art that will outlast empires. Sculptors chip away at blocks of granite and basalt, slowly revealing the forms of gods and kings that will inspire awe for millennia. But even these artistic marvels serve political purposes in the palace environment. The choice of which gods to depict, which pharaohs to honor in stone, which scenes of tribute and conquest to emphasize all reflect current political realities and the need to maintain royal favor. An artist who fails to stay current with changing religious or political fashions may find their commissions drying up, their skills no longer in demand. As evening approaches, the palace comes alive with entertainment that showcases the wealth and sophistication of Egyptian civilization. Musicians skilled in instruments from across the known world fill the halls with melodies both haunting and beautiful. Harps with dozens of strings produce cascades of notes that seem to float on the perfumed air. Flutes carved from rare woods create melodies that speak of distant lands and exotic adventures. Drums provide rhythmic foundations that make even the most dignified courtiers sway unconsciously to their beat. Dancers perform with an athleticism and grace that transforms the human body into a work of art. Their movements, precise and flowing, tell stories of gods and mortals, of seasonal festivals and religious mysteries. Their costumes, made from the finest linen and decorated with gold thread, catch the light as they move, creating patterns that seem almost magical in their beauty. Yet even these entertainments carry subtle messages and implications. The choice of music might honor a particular god currently in favor with Pharaoh, or celebrate a recent military victory that enhanced royal prestige. The dancers' performances might include movements that echo religious ceremonies, connecting the evening's pleasure with the deeper spiritual beliefs that underpin Egyptian civilization. Feasting in the evening reaches levels of luxury that would astound even wealthy people from other civilizations. Dishes arrive in endless succession: whole roasted oxen stuffed with smaller birds and flavored with herbs from the palace gardens, fish prepared with spices that represent the wealth of Egypt's trade networks, pastries sweetened with honey and decorated with edible gold leaf. But abundance brings its own form of stress for the palace dweller. The expectation to appreciate, comment intelligently upon, and properly enjoy these luxuries requires constant attention and energy. Failing to show appropriate enthusiasm for a new dish might suggest ingratitude for royal generosity. Praising the wrong element of a meal might reveal ignorance of current fashions in palace cuisine. Even the act of eating becomes a performance requiring skill and awareness. The evening's conversation moves through topics that blend pleasure with necessity. The latest news from Egypt's provinces and foreign territories provides both entertainment and essential information for anyone involved in imperial administration. Stories of successful harvests in the Delta region, reports of tribute arriving from Nubian gold mines, accounts of diplomatic missions to Syrian city-states are discussed with the kind of casual expertise that marks the true palace insider. But beneath the surface of these elegant conversations lie currents of competition and suspicion that make every social interaction potentially treacherous. The sharing of information is itself a political act. Knowing which news to share, with whom, and when, requires sophisticated understanding of palace dynamics. A carelessly shared piece of intelligence might enhance a rival's position while undermining your own. Too much secrecy, however, might mark you as untrustworthy or potentially disloyal. As the night deepens and most courtiers retire to their chambers, a select few might be invited to continue the evening in more intimate surroundings. These smaller gatherings, often hosted by particularly influential nobles or high-ranking priests, are where the real business of palace politics often occurs. Here, away from the formal protocols of court ceremony, alliances are forged, information is traded, and plans are made that will shape the future of the empire. But even these seemingly relaxed social moments require constant vigilance. A comment that seems friendly might be a probe for weakness or disloyalty. An invitation to share wine might be an attempt to lower your guard and extract damaging information. The very people who smile most warmly and speak most intimately might be gathering intelligence that will later be used against you. Retiring to your chambers provides relief from the day's performances, but it does not bring true peace. Your servants, however loyal they may seem, are also potential sources of information for rivals seeking advantage. Your private conversations, your personal habits, your family relationships, all might be observed and reported to others who seek to understand and potentially exploit your weaknesses. Sleep, when it finally comes, is often troubled by dreams that reflect the stresses of palace life. Visions of falling from royal favor, of rivals advancing at your expense, of family members suffering because of your political mistakes. These anxieties manifest in nighttime fears that mirror the very real dangers of life among the Egyptian elite. For in the end, the golden halls of Egyptian nobility, for all their beauty and luxury, represent a different kind of survival challenge from that faced by field workers and craftsmen. Where the common people struggle against heat, hunger, and physical exhaustion, the elite face the subtler but equally deadly dangers of political intrigue, social competition, and the constant pressure to maintain favor in a world where royal displeasure can mean exile, impoverishment, or death. The palace that seems so magnificent by daylight reveals its true nature in the quiet hours before dawn, a beautiful prison where the inmates compete desperately for the privilege of remaining captive. The golden chains that bind the Egyptian nobility are more comfortable than the crude ropes that constrain the poor, but they are chains nonetheless, and they lead just as surely to servitude. As the night wind whispers through the palace corridors, carrying the scent of lotus blossoms and incense, it reminds us that in ancient Egypt, survival was never guaranteed. Regardless of one's position in society, the field worker might collapse from heat exhaustion, but the courtier might fall victim to a whispered lie or a misinterpreted gesture. Both lived always on the edge of disaster, separated only by the different forms their dangers took. And so our journey through ancient Egypt draws to a peaceful close, as the eternal Nile continues its timeless flow toward the Mediterranean, carrying with it the dreams and memories of countless generations who lived and loved along its banks. We have walked with field workers through the crushing heat of Egyptian summers, felt the weight of endless labor under the merciless sun. We have witnessed the rise and fall of Akhenaten, the revolutionary pharaoh whose vision changed a civilization and ultimately consumed him. We have puzzled over the mysteries of Tomb KV-55, where ancient secrets lie wrapped in linen and political intrigue. We have dined in golden halls where luxury masked the deadly games of palace politics. Through all these experiences, we have learned that survival in ancient Egypt was never simple, regardless of one's station in life. The common worker faced physical challenges that would break modern people within hours. The revolutionary king discovered that even divine authority could not overcome the resistance of entrenched tradition. The mysterious figure in KV-55 found that political upheaval could reach beyond death itself, threatening the eternal life that every Egyptian hoped to achieve. The palace courtier learned that luxury and comfort could become prisons as confining as any dungeon. Yet through all these struggles, the people of ancient Egypt created one of history's most magnificent civilizations. They built monuments that still inspire awe 4,000 years later. They developed art and literature that speaks across the centuries to human hearts, unchanged by time. They established systems of law and government that influenced cultures throughout the ancient world. They achieved a kind of immortality not through the preservation of their bodies, but through the enduring power of their achievements. As you drift now toward sleep, carried gently by the same currents that bore the papyrus boats of ancient Egypt, remember that the challenges faced by those long-ago people are not so different from our own. They struggled to make meaning from daily hardship, to find beauty in difficult circumstances, to build something lasting in a world of constant change. Their victories and defeats, their hopes and fears, their loves and losses all echo still in the human heart. The Nile flows on, patient and eternal, whispering ancient secrets to those who know how to listen. Let its gentle murmur carry you now into peaceful rest, where the dreams of pharaohs and farmers, of kings and craftsmen mingle with your own. In sleep, we are all citizens of that timeless realm where the wisdom of the ancients lives on, and where the mysteries of the past continue to illuminate the path toward tomorrow. Rest well, fellow traveler. The golden halls of Egypt await your return whenever you choose to walk again beside the sacred river that flows through all our dreams.